Good evening, everyone, and welcome to NEWORK's webinar, Move to Action, Saving SNAP, Medicaid, and More. I am Sister Eilish McCullough, and I serve on our grassroots mobilization team. I am thrilled to be with you tonight, to be joined by the nearly 1,800 of you who registered for this webinar, who are taking the time to be together as community, to ground ourselves, to learn more about what is at stake and what exactly is happening as House Republicans are working hard to pass bills that cut key social programs like SNAP and Medicaid in order to give massive tax cuts to the ultra wealthy. To learn more about these tax cuts, members of our government relations team will share more information about the tax cuts, about expanded detention programs, about SNAP and Medicaid. And as always, we will take time for question and answer. I want to remind you to please submit your questions in the Q&A box on your Zoom screen, and we will answer it during the portion at the end of this webinar. We will also share ways for you to take action. Joining me tonight are my colleagues, Joe Neal, who serves as our interim executive director, government relations team members, Laura Peralta Schulte, Jarrett Smith, Renette Osserwatham, and Ralph McLeod. My grassroots mobilization team member, Catherine Gillette, will be giving us our call to action, and Meg Olson is handling tech tonight. We will also be joined by a special guest, Maureen McCullough, who serves on our Development Advisory Council and is also a Philadelphia Advocates team member. She will share a few thoughts with us at the end of our evening. And now I will turn it over to NEWORK's Interim Executive Director, Joe Neal, who will open us in prayer and reflection.
Thank you, Eilish. Good evening, friends, and thank you all for joining us. My friends, as we gather here tonight, our country is in crisis. No matter who we are, no matter where we come from, no matter the color of our skin, whether directly or indirectly, whether we know it or not, each and every one of us is threatened by the cruel and reckless actions of the Trump-Vance administration, Elon Musk, an unelected billionaire, and his minions. They do not believe in freedom and liberty for all. They only want it for a select few. They do not care about the rule of law. They want to be the rulers and do away with the law. Their goal is to destroy our democratic government and replace it with a monarchy, a royal CEO, backed by a group of extremely rich men who only care about money and power. They are taking unprecedented, illegal, and in some cases unconstitutional steps to dismantle our democracy from the inside out and to hurt innocent people in the process. Never before have we faced such a threat to our country, to our chosen method of governance, to our way of life, and to our very lives. This existential danger threatens to take food from the mouths of our children, destabilize seniors who rely on their hard-earned Social Security benefits, cut access to life-saving health care through Medicare, Medicaid, and affordable health care plans, do serious harm to our immigrant neighbors, and eliminate essential household income by firing hundreds of hardworking government employees just for doing their jobs, just for trying to ensure that government works for us. We must name this evil and respond to it. Now, it's understandable that many of us are feeling anxious, unsettled, afraid, betrayed, and even angry. It's okay to feel this way. After all, in just over 30 days, their version of shock and awe has taken its toll on all of us. It's natural that we might just want to turn away and tune out. But now is not the time to do that. It's true we are in uncharted waters as a country, but at the end of the day, remember that the power of democracy resides with us, with we, the people. We are not helpless in the face of this immoral grab of power. As people of faith, as people who believe in the dignity of every human person, the sacredness of all creation, our God-given free will, and the power of the Holy Spirit, we must seize the moment, band together, and confront this existential danger. And my friends, the good news is that we can resist. Like the women of the suffragettes movement and the freedom fighters of the civil rights movement, we too can resist this radical attempt to reshape our country and reset our values. My friends, Scripture tells us God did not give us a spirit of fear, but rather a spirit of power and love and of self-discipline. Now is the time to engage boldly, to speak louder, and to hold those currently in power accountable at every turn. With our strategy of hope, which Pope Francis has called us to in this Jubilee year, let us be inspired to move to action. And as we do, let us call upon the God we know we can depend upon to carry us through today, tomorrow, and however long it takes, so that we can build a society where everyone, including billionaires, pays their fair share, where people have adequate food to eat and safe places to live, where everyone is valued, everyone is accepted, and everyone can thrive, no exceptions. And so, my friends, tonight as we move into action, with the help of some words from the Sisters of Mercy, let us pray. God of infinite mercy, hear our prayer. In this time of bewilderment and fear, we ask you to give us the courage to see everyone as our neighbor, as Jesus did. For those who are frightened and alone, for those who are homeless and lost, God of infinite mercy, hear our prayer. In the midst of our anxiety, we ask you to give us the courage to support one another as you would. For those who are unexpectedly unemployed, for neighbors who share what they can, for those who lead us with integrity in both our government and our church, God of infinite mercy, hear our prayer. In the midst of our struggle to save our democracy, to establish justice, to spread love rather than hate, give us the hope that surpasses all understanding for today, tomorrow, and for all the days to come. God of infinite mercy, hear our prayer. In the midst of our growing awareness that we are all one human family, all your children, called to create a world where everyone thrives, we pray, God of infinite mercy, hear our prayer. We trust in you, O God, and your amazing power, working in and through us. Hear our prayers that we might be the instruments of your love and justice for the transformation and the salvation of our society, our communities, and our country. God of infinite mercy, hear our prayer. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Joan, for calling us to boldly engage, and to ground us in prayer as we begin our webinar today. And now I would like to invite Laura Peralta Schulte to ground us in where we are today and share with us our viewpoint.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you, Sister Eilish. It is so nice to be with you all this evening. In the spirit of the prayer, let me just begin and do a little level setting for us so we can really talk about clearly what Joan was alluding to, but what has happened since President Trump has come into office, January 20th. So as Joan said, the president promised us shock and awe. And what we are in fact seeing is the rollout of Project 2025, which was developed by the Heritage Foundation. Every single area that NEWORK works on has been impacted by various executive orders from the White House, whether it is jobs, whether it is housing, food programs, healthcare. We've seen EOs that want to move us back to dirtier water and our air. We know that they are moving forward to give at minimum $4.5 trillion of tax cuts to the wealthiest among us. Renette will talk you through the heartbreak that we are seeing in terms of immigration work. And clearly, we are seeing an administration that is not responsive to people and rather is beholden to money. If you can go to the next slide. So let us talk about who is actually calling the shots here, because you see on the picture on the slide taken from the inauguration itself, where the wealthiest human beings on the planet were right in front of the cabinet secretaries during the president's inauguration. And in fact, many of you may have seen the first cabinet meeting yesterday at the White House, where the president was relatively quiet, but Elon Musk was up in front of everybody in running the meeting. So we know that there is a piece that he is helping to run called the Department of Government Efficiency. This was created by executive order. And the stated mission is to save taxpayers money and to reduce the national debt. But my friends, make no mistake about it. What they're actually doing is going into agencies that they disagree with. They are indiscriminately slashing budgets and firing personnel. Today, the Social Security Administration was their latest victim. They have access to our most sensitive data, from tax data through healthcare data, and there's no transparency. They're engaging in mass spreading of misinformation. And frankly, Elon Musk himself has significant of interest in terms of the billions of dollars of contracts that his company holds with the federal government. Just today, the Washington Post, as we were jumping onto this webinar, reports that the FAA is set to cancel a contract with Verizon and shift it over to Elon Musk's company. That is a contract with $2.4 billion to his communications firm, Starlink. And that is at the heart of what is happening in the administration. Next slide, please. Is going to respond. And what we are calling our response is truth and light. We are going to be calling out the malfeasance and telling the truth. So we are tracking it. We've got staff on, a tremendous staff on that are working very hard to track each and every executive action that impacts our agenda. We're going to use our voice. We're going to speak out on things that we know are important to you and to our communities. And most importantly, for you to know that we are going to be providing you resources so that you too can be part of speaking out. We also know that the courts are disproportionately important right now because that is where litigation is happening to try to hold the administration accountable for justice. So NEWORK has reached out very strategically to our key partners to make sure that if they are engaging in litigation, that we explore ways that we can partner. Good example is an amicus brief that we signed on to this week that is in support of protecting and defending the Affordable Care Act. Finally, as it relates to truth telling, we need you, because if you share your stories with us, we can lift your stories up and we can help bring those stories to your elected officials. So Congress works for you, reminder, not for their donors. And so when you share stories with us, we can help lift up those messages. Next slide, please. Part of our discussion that we want to focus on from here on out is budget reconciliation, because it is a confusing process and we want to make sure you have the latest information about what it is and what we can do to make it better. I say make it better because this is the president's agenda. So it is very clear that at some point this year, they are very, very likely to get a bill through. So what we are doing right now is to try to take away, rip out the pieces of their legislation that are going to do most harm to our nation. So this right now is a mitigation strategy that we are engaged in, with the long-term goal of, once they pass this bill, making sure that they are held accountable. Just a reminder in terms of what is this budget reconciliation process. It was created in 1974 by the Congressional Budget Act to make it easier for Congress to alter revenue and spending and to align it with its budget. Typically, this process has only been used when a single party holds power over all three branches of government. Recall that we had Build Back Better and the Inflation Reduction Act during the Biden administration, and here we have the same process under the Trump administration. Why is this a different bill than normal? It really has to do with process. So recall that most bills that get through the Senate have to be 60 votes. They need 60 votes. This process allows for somebody, a member and a party, to pass a bill with a simple majority. The kicker here is that these the changes that you can get through budget reconciliation are limited to spending and revenue. So that is the general parameters of budget reconciliation. Next slide, because we've been getting questions and I really want to address where we are in the process. My friends, we are on step one. I really want to say that one more time. We are on step one of a 6-step journey. What is happening right now, both in the House, the vote that we had earlier this week, and in the Senate last week, is they are just trying to come up with the concept of the plan. So that we are at the concept of a plan stage, and what they are doing is simply putting together how much money does each committee have to either spend or to extract from various programs. So friends, we have lots of time to work in terms of this process. Our job is to take, as they are putting pen to paper, to get into the weeds with members of Congress to make sure that they are not taking away healthcare from our people, not taking away SNAP from our people, and all the other issues that they have under fire. So we're at the beginning of the process, not the end of the process. We need you to join in with us on that. Next slide. Just top line in terms of priorities, and you're going to hear more from my wonderful colleagues. They want to spend. So they want to spend on tax cuts for the rich and powerful. Jarrett is going to talk you through that. They want to expand detention and deportation so that they can engage in mass deportation. We call it family separation. Renette is going to talk to you about that. And how do they want to pay for it? They want to take away healthcare. They want to take away food. They want to take away clean energy incentives. And we're going to be fighting to make sure that doesn't happen. Last slide. last slide on my part. So I don't want us to forget our superpower, because we have a superpower. Politics is math. And my friends, it is one thing to pass a budget resolution that doesn't have any detail in it, and they barely got by on Tuesday. Once the pen hits the paper and it is very clear what they're up to, I believe we can make progress to make, at minimal, make sure this bill it hurts our people a lot less than some of those members would like to. Let's get into the details. And for that, we're going to go ahead. I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Jarrett Smith, who's going to bring you up to speed on the tax side.
Thank you so much, Laura. Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. Since our last webinar, significant developments have emerged regarding tax policy in the 119th Congress. The House passed the budget reconciliation on Wednesday. This officially kicks off the budget reconciliation process. Tonight, I'll provide an overview of the proposed tax package and its implications. Tax policy has returned to center stage in Congress. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, also known as TCJA of 2017, passed under Republican control of Congress. The legislation included numerous provisions set to expire at the end of 2025. That is why it is such a priority. One provision in the bill drastically reduced corporate tax rates from 35 to 21%, while providing substantial benefits to high-income individuals. And that corporate tax reduction is permanent. The current Republican tax proposal, valued at $4.5 trillion, let me say that again, that is $4.5 trillion, is being advanced through the reconciliation process. This process only requires 51 votes in the Senate for passage. My colleague Laura already mentioned that, making it filibuster proof. The cuts to programs like Medicaid and SNAP are being used to pay for trillions of tax cuts that primarily benefit the wealthy. Just read the latest Penn Wharton budget models analysis on the extension of the TCJA, and the bottom line is the rich continue to get rich, and the lower income people in our country continue the tradition of paying for the wealthy's lifestyle. Let's go to the slide that has all of the companies on it. So if you look at this slide, you know many of these companies. Imagine if we shared 100 cookies among different groups of people. The way these tax changes work is kind of like that. The people who already have lots of money, like 100 cookies, would get 80 more cookies. But people who don't have much money would only get the tiny cookie crumb. That doesn't seem very fair, does it? Most regular families like yours and your friends would only get 3 or 4 cookies. Let's focus in on FedEx. There was a time when FedEx paid taxes that helped all of us. And that tax money helped pay for schools and parks. But now they're keeping almost all that money. For example, FedEx used to share $18 of every 100 they made. Now they only share $1. That's like if you had 100 pieces of candy and only shared 1 piece with your friends. Other big companies on this list, like Verizon, the phone and cellular company, and internet provider, are doing the same thing, keeping more money instead of providing the things that make our society strong. Let's go back to the first slide. There's one area in this tax package that people have been talking about a lot, and that is private equity. Private equity, according to the Washington Center for Equitable Growth in 2023, their deals that they did in that year account for more than 1/3 of all major acquisition activity in the United States, with total annual deal value in 2021 and 2022 of more than $1 trillion, comprising about 9,000 deals. So why is private equity doing all this business in this country? Well, the tax code makes it very favorable for them. One area that you probably read in the newspaper or heard on the news, private equity is buying up a lot of homes in people's neighborhoods, and they buy a lot of healthcare facilities. So their appetite for these deals is insatiable. And part of that is private equity firms utilize debt financing for acquisitions. And because of the tax code, they're able to write off the interest on that debt. One other area that they're able to use the tax code is what is called carry interest taxation. The income earned by general partners, known as carried interest, is taxed at the lower long-term capital gains rate, that's around 20%, rather than the ordinary income that you and I usually pay, that's around 37%. Another part of the tax code that they are able to capture is called depreciation and amortization. Private equity firms can use depreciation and amortization deductions to offset taxable income, particularly for assets acquired during buyouts. And then they have one thing that is driving the reason why they're in the residential market. They have a real estate tax benefit for them. If private equity firms invest in real estate, they may benefit from other deductions such as accelerated depreciation and other property-related tax incentives. With a lot of advocacy work in front of us, we need you to call, write LTEs, and attend meetings with your congressman and tell them the working class should not pay for more tax cuts for wealthy individuals in the biggest US companies. But there is a reality I must mention. It will be very difficult, nearly impossible, to stop budget reconciliation. But we must make the Republicans accountable for their actions. I look forward to answering any questions at the end of the webinar. Now I'll toss it to my colleague, Renee.
Thank you so much, Jared. Good evening, everyone. So nice to be here with you. I hope you can hear me okay. As my colleague was saying, the Trump administration wants to line the pockets of billionaires, but not just with tax cuts, but also with giving massive government contracts to billionaires, especially in the detention and deportation business. Let me be clear. Deportation is a lawful practice if done correctly. Every country has the right to deport people, and the US has done it for years. But deportation must be done under the law, and the law's first duty is to ensure that anyone being deported is not tortured or harmed in any extreme way in the country that they are being deported to. When a judge finally signs off on a deportation order, the judge should have determined through all ways possible that no extreme harm or torture would befall the person being deported in the country that they're being sent to. Also, usually people are deported to the country they're from or have permanent residency, and therefore governments are not allowed to render someone stateless through deportation. But that is not the type of deportation that is happening today. Today, we know many people, even US citizens, are being taken from their homes and their workplaces, held in detention, and deported to countries that they're not from, never been, and held in conditions that are torturous. We must remember that no not the quote unquote worst of the worst, not a felon who has been convicted of 34 felony charges. No one can be tortured or held in extreme harmful conditions. And the reason that no one can be, and the reason that that is so is because we are a democracy. We should all be extremely alarmed that these measures of deportation and detention in these terrible conditions are being carried out in this country in the open, because it means that our very democracy is under attack. Deportation, especially mass deportation, cannot happen without mass detention, because deportation has to be done with the consent of the receiving country. So until a country agrees to take its own nationals or other nationals, as in the case of Panama, we have seen this week, people are kept in detention. And in both the deportation and detention of human beings, there is money to be made for the billionaire. Let me be clear. Billionaires are not making this money because of some kind of brilliant business deal or fantastic innovation. Billionaires are becoming trillionaires because the Trump administration and the Republican Congress is giving them your money, a handout of your money to feed on the misery of the immigrant. Next slide, please. Your taxpayer money is going to be taken away from programs that benefit you, your friends, your family, and put into detention and deportation. Therefore, when you complain and worry that there is no money for social programs that benefit the whole community, you will not blame billionaires. No, your anger will be directed to the defenseless immigrant. Because, quote unquote, there are too many immigrants and the government needs to keep you safe from these lawbreakers, end quote. But again, we need to know, immigrants don't make you unsafe. What makes you unsafe is that your elected government is giving away power to unelected billionaires. What makes you less safe is that your hard-earned money is going out as handouts to billionaires. In this reconciliation budget that Laura spoke about, and we will continue to work on in the next couple of days, the Republican Congress is proposing to give $300 billion, let me repeat that, $300 billion for detention and deportation. The main private prison companies are GEO and CoreCivic, as I have named in this slide. And many of the Trump administration staff have shares in these companies. Those private prison corporations are set to triple their profits. Again, not their operating costs, but their profits of the handouts of your tax money. And do you know how much $300 billion would buy you? $300 billion could fund the entire SNAP.
Hey everyone, I'm so sorry. I think Renette's audio or visual froze. So we are going to shift to Ralph, who is going to talk about SNAP.
Thank you, Sister Alicia. As you're aware, SNAP, or the Supplemental Nutrition and Assistance Program, plays a critical role in providing nutritious food and reducing food insecurity. If the proposed cuts are enacted into law, millions of children and families would lose healthy foods and meals across our country. This could also include school meals. The Supplemental Nutrition and Assistance Program has for decades been one of our most effective tools to prevent hunger. But even with SNAP in place, some 34 million of our neighbors and friends still face hunger, including over 9 million children. Cuts to SNAP and school meals are not just cuts to the beneficiaries, they also affect the entire food ecosystem, if you will, the entire food workforce. You see, every dollar of federal SNAP benefits generates $1.79 in economic activity. These cuts impact farmers, truckers, grocers, small business owners, and families across our country. Next slide, please. There are many challenges ahead. Among those are urging Congress to resist any cuts to the current SNAP benefits and against any new and more punishing work requirements. These work requirements are punitive and seek to punish families in times where unemployment is rising. Doubling down on these work reporting requirements places cumbersome undertakings on already struggling folk, and these only delay the very essential and needed benefits and exasperates the suffering. Work recording requirements were already updated and increased last year. But what's worse is these draconian cuts to programs that assist the most vulnerable in our world, in our society, in our country, would best be used to pay for massive tax breaks for the rich. Next slide, please. Opportunities, or perhaps maybe even low-hanging fruit, would be to urge Congress to remove the Farm Bill's unjustifiable and unreasonable lifetime ban on SNAP benefits for individuals who have been convicted of drug felonies. In summary, what is undeniable, access to nutritious food through SNAP improves health outcomes. It leads to community productivity, increased likelihood of maintaining employment, and more likely to find and maintain significant important maintaining employment, contributing to their financial stability and their abilities to rise out of poverty. And the long-term benefits for children who receive SNAP benefits are more likely to perform better academically, have improved health, and achieve higher levels of education. These long-term benefits can break the cycle of poverty and lead to greater economic opportunities in adulthood. The return on investment is unquestionable. Cutting SNAP would have devastating and dreadful consequences. Friends, hunger is a moral issue and should be a concern for all of faith communities and all people of goodwill. And with that, I would like to invite Laura back, who will share some of the threats to Medicaid. Laura?
Thank you so much, Ralph. We want to say amen. Hunger is a moral issue, and we all know that healthcare is a moral issue as well. So you have undoubtedly been reading about possibilities of modifications or cuts in the Medicaid program. So what we wanted to do is just introduce you real quickly, just as a refresher, like who actually is on Medicaid. And I think this slide by our partners over at CBPP is just so beautiful because two in every 5 births, 2 in 5 kids, 1 in non-elderly adults, 2 in 5 non-elderly adults with disabilities, 1 in 4 folks that are suffering from mental health challenges, and 3 in 5 nursing home facilities all run on Medicaid. They all run on Medicaid. And so this is a program that regardless of where you are in life, it impacts us. We want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to fight back against these very draconian cuts and changes that they're suggesting. Next slide. You, again, there are a lot of ways that you can slice and dice this program. I would just want to make the point right now that all of the things that we're going to talk about tonight have 2 impacts. 1, they take away healthcare coverage from people that need them. And 2, it's a cost shift, either to the states or to vulnerable people. I'm just very clear, and I know you are too, that for people of faith, and particularly in the Catholic tradition, Healthcare is a right, not a privilege. So we are fighting for life when we fight for healthcare. If they put on caps to Medicaid, if they end the expansion of Medicaid, if they impose work requirements, if they end health protections for particular communities, if they decide not to move forward in terms of extending premium tax credits, all of them harm our people. And this is where one of our key fights needs to be. Next slide. So let's take the first piece, which is slashing federal payments. Now, there's a lot of money to be gotten in terms of modifications to the Medicaid space, but in particular, changing the payments from the federal government to the state government can raise up to 1.3 trillion with a T, $trillion. How does that look and what does it mean? There's discussion about ending the ACA of 90% for those states who enrolled with Medicaid coverage when it was expanded. There is discussion about eliminating the 50% floor from federal matching grants. Some discussion about eliminating the higher federal matching percentage for Washington, D.C. But let's put this in perspective, again, who is actually impacted? There are more than 20 million people that have benefited from Medicaid expansion. It already costs, because we know that Medicaid is a joint federal state program, it already costs state under current budget $14.9 billion in terms of their share to pay for Medicaid. If you make some of these changes, for example, you change the 90% match, that is $64.9 billion that the federal government is not picking up, that will be left to the states. If you increase the cost for 11 states with the lowest matching percentage, if the floor is removed, it's a lot of money, $42.9 billion. But my friend, the cost does not go away, just what the federal government is intending to pay. And then who pays? You're looking at the state. And states, we know, have very tight budgets. And so it leads to the conclusion, it leads to the cutting off of people's healthcare in a very real way. Let's go to the next slide. Another piece is a per capita cap, lots of discussion about it, which in effect ends Medicaid as an entitlement. You can raise with a per capita cap over $900 billion. I just want to really draw your attention to this chart, because what you see in it is, if you look at the total Medicaid cuts for a per capita cap, the federal spend does not change over time, but the cumulative cut changes dramatically over time. Why? Because healthcare spending has extraordinary levels of inflation between 12 and 14% a year. So again, let's back up and say, what does it mean? This means that, again, states are going to foot the bill, and so are Medicaid beneficiaries. Let's go to the next slide. This issue of work requirement is pernicious and really has quite a bit of traction. We've been meeting a lot with House Republican offices who are very open to the idea of work requirements. If you were to put on work requirements, you could raise $120 billion. Let me just again remind us of who we're talking about. 67% of those on Medicaid are kids, are people with disabilities, and seniors, particularly seniors in nursing homes. So there is no evidence, because a number of states have already tried this, Georgia, Arkansas. It was so bad in terms of impact on patients that they had to walk back the work requirements. And there was absolutely no evidence to suggest that it encouraged people to work. In fact, when people are sicker, they drop out of the workforce. And so what in fact you're doing is just dropping people off of the rolls, because you're making it really hard to access healthcare. If you look at this chart, again, by our friends at the center, It argues that 44% of all Medicaid employees, enrollees rather, are at risk of losing their health care. So again, the question that we have to ask ourselves is, what are we doing? Why, when healthcare is necessary, are we putting more burdens on people other than with the intent of people dropping off to, quote, save some money? Next slide, please. Finally, there are some things that you can do to the Affordable Care Act to get some money, upwards of $151 billion. Let's say the first two that you see on your slide are the intersection of immigration and healthcare. So make it very likely in this bill, forcing states like California to drop health coverage for non-US citizens, threatening to go after folks that with an immigration status who use public benefits. We saw that in the first Trump administration when they went after public benefits. Requiring very vulnerable workers whose wages go up and down over time to have to pay back their premium tax credit if they peak over the threshold, or simply ending the premium tax credits that are really helping over 4 million people secure their health care. Next slide, please. What we don't want to do is leave you in a sense of hopelessness, in a sense that we don't have agency and that we can't fight. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Catherine Gillette, who is going to tell us what we can actually do to protect our people, to raise our voice, and to get into the fight. Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks, Laura. And actually, we are going to hold that thought because we have Renette back, and Renette is going to wrap up her thoughts on immigration, and then I will give us our call to action.
Hi, all. Very sorry that I suddenly froze. Technology is not helping with the billionaires. But very quickly, what I wanted to wrap up with is, in the reconciliation budget, the Republican Congress is proposing that $300 billion be allocated for detention and deportation. And what we can buy from the $300 billion is what all of my colleagues, Ralph and Laura and Jared, have been saying, is that with $300 billion, we can pay for SNAP. SNAP was costed as $100 billion in 2023. We can pay for WIC, which is the Women, Infants, and Children nutrition program, and we can still have $150 billion left. So we are paying out of your money $300 billion to billionaires to reach the profit. And the billionaire companies are these groups that I have named in this slide, the Geo Group and the Core Civic slide, and the Core Civic, all of which all of which the Trump administration staffers have shares in this. The US is the richest country in the world, and the richest country in the world is planning on passing a law to take away funds and food from babies to pay billionaires so that billionaires can keep immigrants in detention. This is going to be a permanent law, and therefore, let us not think that in 4 years, in 1 year, in 3 years, any of this is going to change. The time to act is now, and we can do this together. So therefore,
I think we lost Renette again, but that's okay. I am here, and a huge thanks to all of my colleagues on NEWORK's government relations team for sharing their expertise with us and for all of their work around the clock. We are so grateful for all of their efforts, and I hope that you found their presentation as helpful as I did. Now, what I hope you're all asking yourselves is, what now? Where do we go from here? And that is what I am here to talk about this evening. We hope that all of you will sign up to organize in-district lobby visits with your representative's local office between March 10th and 21st. As you heard, the House passed their budget resolution this week, and we expect the Senate to follow soon. After that, Congress has to figure out all the details. And so our House members are going to be home in district March 17th to the 21st, and pressure from those constituents is going to be absolutely key. Now, I know there was a lot of information shared tonight, and if you're a little overwhelmed or a little bit nervous, that's okay. You do not have to be a policy expert to participate in these visits. Your faith perspective, your moral perspective, your perspective as a constituent is really, really powerful. They need to hear from you, the constituents, that you do not want cuts to SNAP or Medicaid to pay for tax breaks for our nation's wealthiest or to pay for detention and deportation. As far as logistics go, the first step is going to be signing up to participate using the link that we include in the follow-up email. So keep an eye out for that follow-up email so you can sign up to participate in these visits. And once you do so, we are going to do our best to connect you with other constituents from your district so that you can, there's power in numbers, right? So you can go with other folks from your district. We also encourage you to think about who from your personal network may be interested in joining you, especially folks who can speak to how SNAP and Medicaid have improved their lives or improved the lives of people that they care about. We know that members of Congress are really hungry for these stories right now. They want to hear about how these programs benefit their constituents, how these programs benefit their districts, and what the impact would be if these programs were to be cut. If you think back to our fight to save the ACA, we helped provide members of Congress with all kinds of stories, and some of those stories were read from the House floor, and that was pretty cool. The next step after you get signed up and figure out who your group is going to be is having one member of your group reach out to your local office to actually schedule the visit. And those of you who have done this before, you know sometimes it takes a little nudging, a little reminding, a couple of emails, a couple of phone calls, a little persistence. But those of you who participated in the January drop-offs, many of you already have relationships with some of the staffers at the office. And so this is a really great opportunity to do a follow-up touch and to grow those relationships that you built starting in January. If you are new to advocacy, do not worry. Our communications team has put together a beautiful website with lots more information. Additionally, our organizing team is more than happy to work with you. We're going to be following up with every single person who registers and providing any kind of assistance that we can. Prior to your visit, we encourage you to do a little planning session with everyone who's going to be participating, just so you can kind of figure out who's going to say what. And just a note, we are going to be providing you with talking points. We're going to be providing you with leave behinds. We're going to be providing you with all kinds of other materials to support you and equip you for success. And then after your visit, we do ask that you report back. We're going to have a report back form. We want to hear what the staffers had to say, what your experience was like, what did you learn on your lobby visit? And this information that you gather is really, really helpful for both our government relations team as well as our faith and secular partners in DC. We also encourage you to post about your experience on social media and to tag your representatives. This is a great way to educate your personal network about your advocacy and to let representatives know that you plan to hold them accountable. As you heard from Laura, as you heard from the rest of the team, public pressure is really, really important right now. So we would love to have you all participate in these lobby visits. However, if you were unable to help out with a lobby visit in district, either in person or virtually, we definitely understand. We know not everyone is able to. That's okay. We do ask, though, that you make phone calls to your representative's office during that March 10 to 21st window to share your concerns that way and to help amplify our efforts. And then we, of course, encourage you to have your friends and your family do the same thing. Now, you may be wondering, okay, this is all focused on the House. What about the Senate? Don't worry, there are going to be opportunities coming up really soon in April, April 14th to the 25th, when we are going to be focusing on the Senate and encouraging some advocacy there. So stay tuned. We are going to be focusing on the Senate soon, but we do hope that all of you will join us in advocacy in March with the House and district because your perspectives as constituents are really, really important. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Sister Eilish, who's going to lead us through our Q&A. And so I think I'm going to invite all of my friends to come back and join, and we will have some time for question and answer. There were lots of good questions in the chat.
Thank you so much, Catherine, and thank you so much to everyone for all of your questions. I think if we took the time to answer all of them, we would be here for at least another hour. So we're just going to do a couple, and know that we will continue to look at the questions after the webinar. We'll reply to you with answers, and feel free to email us at info@networklobby.org with any follow-up questions, and we will get back to you. So to start off the questions, one of the first questions that we had tonight was, what do I do if my representatives agree with our values? If they're in support of what we're talking about, what's the advocacy for that look like? And I'll toss it up, whoever wants to answer that one.
If I could jump in, it is very powerful when a member goes to the floor and talks his or her views. So I would ask members that if they affirm what Network's morals are, values, I would ask them to take some floor time, go and tell their colleagues that what they're doing is wrong, and the consequences of it, and how it's going to hurt everyday people in this country. Another thing is, there are a lot of times members have like member luncheons, or they have interactions where they can talk to one another. Members can't be afraid. They have to stand up for what's right. And I just would ask them to do that at this time.
Thank you, Jarrett.
And if I could too, I would just echo that and say that oftentimes they can find themselves in very lonely places, and they need the affirmation, the backup, to know that there's someone who supports them in this effort. And to the degree that someone can find someone else who agrees with them, and they can also let the members know, that can provide and encourage an incredible amount of courage for when they do the things that Jared just spoke about, in time talking to other members. But oftentimes it can be a very lonely place, and they need to know that they're not by themselves in this regard.
Absolutely. I was going to say, call them anyway. Let them know that you agree with them and you support them and you have their back, and ask them how you can be helpful. But also from an organizing perspective, think about your friends and family who may live elsewhere. Think about who their representatives and senators are, and maybe reach out to 3 friends or 5 friends and get them to make some calls to their own senators and representatives. Do a little organizing work. That's really important right now.
Thank you so much for all the answers. Our next question comes from Teresa in Des Moines. And she says, I've heard that the GOP has a messaging campaign to claim that the reduction in Medicaid isn't really cutting Medicaid. And I know that we've heard about this a lot, but it is only reducing waste, fraud, and abuse. She says, I know otherwise, but how do we overcome that messaging? What do we talk about?
So I'll go back to process, because we are in phase 1 of that process. And all that is numbers on a page. You cannot get $880 billion of savings without significantly changing the Medicaid program. We have been meeting with the very members on the Republican side in the House, having this very sacred conversation with them alongside activists from their communities, to really ask them to think clearly, like, what are the specific damages, and to do what Pope Francis calls us to do, is to encounter them with story, to try to break it open their hearts. The materials that we're going to send are going to outline kind of how you can move forward. I've seen a number of the letters that some of you have received. Thank you so much for sharing them. Friends, all I'm saying is, yes, at this point in the process, all we have is a number, but we have analyzed various documents over time, including Project 2025, and know the direction that they are going. So just be with us. We will provide you with what you need to be effective in your advocacy. But keep going, because that is particularly when we see ledge text, we will know very clearly which way they're going, and you've got to surround your member and remind him or her about what their duty is, because healthcare is a right, food is a right, not a privilege.
Go ahead, Renette.
Hi, I just want to add to what Laura is saying is, we really need to watch not what they say, but what they do. And this is what we're seeing. So, clearly, as Laura was saying, please do, they try to make it a complicated bill. They try to tell you, oh, we're not actually taking this away. We're making sure there's work requirements. We're not actually putting in detention good people, but bad people. Whenever you hear nuances, just remember they are lying. The simple message is that they are really going to take these things away. And this is why we really need to act and shout back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Renette. And we're going to do 2 more just short questions, and then we promise we will get back. We have one question that is regarding state budgets too. And it says, don't the states also have to balance their budgets unlike the federal government? Is putting the responsibility for these programs on the states, will that necessitate a rise in state tax collections, further affecting the burden on the poor, on those who are poor?
Ralph and Jared, as former executives, can tell you they were responsible for balancing budgets. I will just tell you, in terms of, at least from my view, that this is not about efficiencies. This is about cost shifting, very mindful that most states are running very close to a deficit. And in fact, some do have the need to balance their budgets under their state constitutions. Jared and Ralph, do you want to add anything as former elected officials, and how would you see this from your perspective if you were still holding the dais?
Well, I'll say you're right. I mean, most constitutions, I can't speak for every state, but they do have the need to balance the budgets. But it's kind of a shell game in a sense, in that it depends on what they want to spend revenue on and how they want to spend revenue. They want to spend revenue on and what the political will is. Is revenue designed to help those persons who are struggling, persons who are pushed to the margins, or do they want to do increased tax cuts? Balancing and that's very similar in the conversation is very similar and that we're having, that you would have with a state legislature that we're talking about having with the U.S. Congress. I don't know, Jared, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I would add, and I affirm everything you're saying, Ralph, but I would add that many states in the union, they get more money from the federal government. They just cannot afford, to come up with more money for these programs. Their tax base is not there, right? They can't add more taxes to the residents of that state. So it's a red herring, by saying that you're going to shift this cost to the states because, the federal government just can't afford it. I mean, that's just not true. States, if you're in a state like California, you're sending a lot of money to the federal government, to DC. But many southern states, you need that support from the federal government. So when a big healthcare program like Medicaid is moved toward the state General Assembly, that they have to come up with the money for it, it's just not going to happen, and a lot of people will suffer because of it.
Thank you so much. And one very quick question, and I'm going to toss this to you, Laura, just with a very short response.
I'm the chattiest of all, so
I know.
I'll try.
So we'll keep it tight. There's a question about timing. I know you walked us through the whole process, but with how fast the administration, how fast Congress is moving, we have some worry that is March 10th through 21st when we're looking at the time for these visits. Is that going to be too late?
No, my friends, because pen has not touched the paper. They they put out a calendar in early in this process and committed to finishing the entire process right as we head into June. If I'm a betting person, and maybe I won't admit it out loud, I think that's going to probably slip into June, July. But they are intent on passing it. It's the president's budget. And our both actions in March and actions in April are prophetic. We are one with the Spirit. And so we are well timed to take action and really encourage folks to jump in and help save our country.
Thank you so much, Laura, Renette, Jarrett, Ralph, and Catherine, for all your answers to these questions. The questions have been pouring into the chat as we've been going on, so we will continue to get back to you with answers. At this point, we are going to switch gears a bit, and I would like to welcome our special guest to the stage as I do my screen share here. Maureen McCullough, as I said, is a strong supporter of NEWORK, and she serves on our Development Advisory Council. She's also a member of our amazing Philadelphia Advocates team. So Maureen, thank you so much for joining us here tonight.
Thanks, Sister Elise. We are indeed in unprecedented times, are we not? Tonight, I just wanted to share a couple of feelings that I have if we listen to all of this information. My first is a feeling of pride. I am so incredibly proud of the tremendous staff at NEWORK. Their expertise, both in lobbying on the Hill and their outreach and grassroots, their tireless passion and commitment to justice, the tremendous resources that they provide to us, and the trainings that they offer. We are blessed with a tremendous staff. Also, another feeling is one of gratitude. Gratitude for the community that is here this evening, for the community that we are growing and will continue to grow. Our support, your support, is needed now more than ever. If you are not yet a member of NEWORK, I urge you to become a member of NEWORK. If you are a member of NEWORK, I really encourage you to identify one or two other people that you know and invite them to become a member. If you are a member, consider giving a donation beyond your membership contribution. We will have a slide, there is one on the screen there, but we'll also provide a way that you can take action with your voice, with your letters, with your emails. All of that is so critically important at this time. You know, I was reflecting, and I want to share a quote from Robert Kennedy from 1966 when he was in Cape Town, South Africa, speaking on the issue of apartheid to students. Few of us will have the greatness to bend history itself, but each one of us can work to change a small portion of events. For each time one reaches out to improve the lot of another, or to stand up for an ideal, or strikes out against injustice, they send out a tiny ripple of hope. And crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those small ripples build a current that can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. Use your voice, use your action, become a part of that current. We've heard a lot of distressing news this evening, but together we as a community of faith, a community of advocates can make a difference. I urge you to leave this session this evening, to be engaged, to look to contribute, to look to raise your voice, to build community with others. This is not over, and we shall overcome. I urge your continued support for the wonderful work of NEWORK, because in fact, we all are NEWORK. Thanks so very much for being here this evening. Let us continue to fight for justice in our world.
Thank you, Maureen. It was so good to have you on the webinar this evening. And I know that I can speak for my colleagues at NEWORK to say that we are grateful for your support, for all of your support, whether it is financial or it is your prayerful support. That is what keeps us going day in and day out. And we cannot do this work of political ministry without you. Now, as we end our evening together, I want to give you a little teaser of our project for Lent. Maybe you saw a post on Facebook yesterday or Instagram that said something like, "What are you giving up for Lent?" Well, we know that next Wednesday is Ash Wednesday, and we hope that you will join all of us in calling on Congress to give up billionaires for Lent. We are so excited about this campaign and so excited about what we will be doing together. Stay tuned for more information. And as we've said at the beginning, you will receive a recording of this webinar in the next couple days, along with all of the materials that we have talked about, including the slides. Thank you, thank you, thank you for joining us this evening, for being in this fight with us. We cannot do it alone. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Have a good night.